The British Empire was the largest in history. It controlled 13 of the world's landmass at its peak in the early 20th century. But how did this happen? The story of the British Empire is a long one, so we've broken it down into 3 parts. How Britain became a global power, how the empire peaked, and how the empire fell. How Britain became a global power. Before the 16th century, Britain wasn't really a major player on the world stage. The 2 island nations of England and Scotland were relatively small and unimportant, regularly being raided by the nearby Vikings and living rather uneventful lives. Then came the age of exploration, which changed everything. In 1497, an English explorer named John Cabot reached North America, opening the door for colonization. This would be the start of an overseas empire that would eventually stretch to every corner of the globe. But before they could conquer the world, the English had to conquer themselves. England and Scotland were often at war with each other, not to mention the growing threat of Spain, who were trying to convert the natives of the New World to Catholicism. To defend itself, England needed a strong central government, which is exactly what they got when Henry VIII took the throne in 1509. He started the process of creating a navy to rival the Spanish Armada and asserted royal authority over the English Parliament. Though England had come a long way, it still had a lot of growing to do before becoming a global superpower. And that's why the next part is going to be a quick history lesson. So sit back and relax while we quickly cover some of the most important events in English history from the 16th to 18th centuries. So now we're back. Let's get back to the video. The reign of Queen Elizabeth I marked a golden age for England. Her defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 established England as a major naval power, and her support of explorers like Sir Francis Drake helped expand England's colonial holdings. But perhaps even more importantly, the Elizabethan era saw the flourishing of English literature, music, and art, all of which contributed to the cultural flowering that would become a hallmark of the British Empire. After Elizabeth's death, England entered a civil war between the monarchy and Parliament, ultimately resulting in the execution of King Charles I and the establishment of a republic. Oliver Cromwell then led the country through a period of great expansion, conquering Ireland and large parts of North America. But after Cromwell's death, the monarchy was restored and England began to pursue a less aggressive foreign policy. In the 18th century, England found itself in competition with France and Spain for global dominance. Through a series of wars, including the War of the Spanish Succession and the 7 Years' War, England emerged victorious and established itself as the world's leading naval power. This, coupled with the Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain, gave England the economic and military might to forge a massive empire around the world. The peak of the empire, now that England had become a global power, it was time to build an empire. They started small, conquering Ireland in the early 16th century and establishing colonies in North America, Africa, and Asia. They fought many conflicts with France and Spain to secure their holdings and push further. By the early 19th century, the British Empire was at its peak, controlling around a quarter of the world's landmass and ruling over around a fifth of the world's population. At this point, the sun never set on the British Empire. With colonies on every continent, Britain was truly a global power. The secret to the success of the empire is often attributed to the introduction of representative government in its colonies, allowing local populations to have a say in their own affairs. However, this was often more of a formality than a reality, with the British government frequently overriding the decisions of colonial legislatures when it suited them. Furthermore, despite the introduction of representative government in some colonies, many others, particularly those in Africa and Asia, were ruled directly by the British Crown with little or no local representation. It's also worth noting that the British Empire's vast size and diversity made it difficult to govern effectively, and corruption and mismanagement were common. Nevertheless, the introduction of representative government in some colonies did contribute to the development of political institutions and practices in many parts of the world, and the British Empire's legacy in this regard is complex and multifaceted. While the empire undoubtedly had a negative impact on the course of history, it did introduce some positive elements such as representative government to some parts of the world. However, it's important to note that these positive aspects were often overshadowed by the negative impacts of the empire and were implemented selectively depending on the region and time period. Another factor contributing to the success of the empire was Britain's industrial and technological superiority. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain in the late 18th century, gave Britain an enormous advantage over its competitors. With superior factories, railroads, and weapons, Britain was able to subdue and control its colonies much more easily. Additionally, Britain's naval supremacy during this period allowed it to project power around the world and protect its extensive trade routes. However, the success of the empire cannot be attributed solely to industrial and technological factors. Britain's ability to maintain a large and efficient army and navy was also crucial to its success. During the 19th century, Britain's military forces were among the largest and most powerful in the world. Its army and navy were well trained and equipped, and its leaders were experienced and competent. Moreover, Britain's vast wealth and resources allowed it to maintain a strong military presence around the world. This was particularly important in the early days of the empire, when Britain was still expanding its territory. A strong military was essential to protect its colonies from external threats and to suppress any rebellions or resistance movements. As the empire grew, Britain's military became even more important. It was tasked with maintaining order and security in a vast and diverse territory that spanned multiple continents. This required a sophisticated system of communication and transportation, as well as a highly trained and disciplined force. Furthermore, Britain's military was not only responsible for defending its colonies, but also for protecting its extensive trade routes. During the 19th century, trade was becoming increasingly important to the British economy, and its colonies were a vital source of raw materials and markets for finished goods. To protect this trade, Britain maintained a strong naval presence in key strategic locations around the world. Overall, Britain's military played a crucial role in the success of the empire. Its size, efficiency, and technological superiority were instrumental in subduing and controlling its colonies and protecting its vast trade routes. The fall of the empire. In the early 20th century, the British Empire began to decline. The First and Second World Wars devastated the British economy and led to the rise of new global powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. As the empire crumbled, many of Britain's colonies gained independence, and the British Empire, once the largest in history, shrunk dramatically. Today, only a handful of territories remain under British rule. There are several reasons for the decline of the British Empire. One of the most significant was the growing desire for self-determination among the colonies. As the 20th century progressed, many colonies began to demand greater autonomy and eventually full independence. This was driven in part by the rise of nationalism, which emphasized the importance of self-rule and cultural identity. The growth of democratic ideas and institutions in Britain and its colonies also contributed to this trend. As educated elites began to demand a greater voice in government. Additionally, the weakening of Britain's economic and military power after the two world wars made it increasingly difficult to maintain control over its far-flung empire. The rise of new global powers like the United States and the Soviet Union also played a role in the decline of the British Empire. These superpowers were able to provide aid and support to anti-colonial movements, making it more difficult for Britain to hold on to its colonies. Moreover, the changing nature of global politics in the second half of the 20th century, with the end of the Cold War and the rise of new international organizations, created a more multipolar world that was less tolerant of colonialism. Today, the legacy of the British Empire is a complicated one. On one hand, the empire brought about a period of great prosperity and stability to Britain and its colonies. It also introduced many positive aspects to the world, such as representative government and advanced technologies. On the other hand, the empire was built on exploitation and oppression and had a devastating impact on the course of history. Ultimately, the British Empire was a double-edged sword that left both positive and negative legacies that continue to shape the world today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more historical tales. Also, check out our community tab where we have a growing community of history lovers. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.